We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey. Hey, Bobby, welcome to the podcast.
Works for
and
me.
I'm so glad we're finally getting this off the ground. This is awesome. And so I'm just going to kind of touch on a little bit of what I know about you, and then we're going to let you kind of run with the story because this is really interesting. So first of all, you have a book, and it's To the Survivors: One Man's Journey as a Rape Crisis Counselor with True Stories of Sexual Violence. And I know we were just talking about the fact that you were a rape crisis counselor, which thank you. That's got to be a really, really difficult position to be in. But and I know you've probably helped so many people, and you've got some good stories. And you said something really great before the podcast started, which was that people can go through horrific crimes and still have a fulfilling life, right?
Yes. I've been doing this currently for officially kind of 15 years of rape crisis counseling and public education, and trying to provide people with resources and just raising awareness of the realities of sexual violence. And I can honestly say that people really do heal. People really do live fulfilling lives. They live loving lives. They can rise above, and they can be all the way to the point of suicide and end up in a beautiful, healthy marriage and a career they love, and have it not derail them and cripple them and control them. And it's a beautiful gift to be able to do that. And I'm always just in awe of the strength of survivors globally, of people that experience these crimes and how they live with it and how they deal with it.
Yeah, I love that. And that's true with the sexual abuse or the childhood abuse, is that we can heal to the point that we can have fulfilling lives. I mean, these situations take our lives in a different direction, but you can bring it back and you can have a fulfilling life. And I love that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
tell
it's really
us,
special.
yeah, it is. Sorry, I didn't mean to start to talk over you. So tell us about your experience and your stories.
Well, it's quite a range. It's quite a range of experiences. You mentioned my book. I mean, I've been at book festivals, and just having my book and my signs can trigger people. You know, the
Yeah,
topic of rape, the topic of sex, topic of anything with sexual can instantly trigger someone into, again, horrific experiences, horrible memories. They can have feelings, and they can feel things in their body can react. And so
flashbacks probably.
flashbacks and things out of their control that can really affect them in negative ways, because they're like, why did my body do that? Why is my mind going there?
Yeah.
So it shows you how sensitive it is. It shows you
Hmm.
how deep it can be for many people, and how you always have to be prepared to handle that. And that's on one end of it. On the other hand, there's people that are just so happy and thankful that I and other people do the work, and they're just so grateful, that someone cares about this issue. And there are many people that care about this issue, and many people um, that do the work, and many people that could do the work. There's many people that do have they might have a calling. They might feel something inside that makes them have a desire to do this, but they might be scared to. They might not know how to. And so it's important to let them know they have the gifts to do it, because more people, I would argue, more people need to do it, because sadly there's
Hmm.
just a need for it. So, people get triggered. People are very thankful. You're able to have uh you can I've just met with so many just strangers, and been able to impact lives, and they've impacted my life. So it's quite a reciprocal relationship, if that makes any sense. And
Hmm. Oh yeah.
it's it's really it's tough, but it's a blessing,
I
and I
was going
love
to
it.
say it's tough, but it's rewarding as well, because
Mhm.
when you see someone, when I see someone go on their healing path, whether I help them or whoever helps them, it's one of the most fulfilling things for me to see. I love to see people heal and, and go in a different direction than where this situation took them. Because it seems like, even though I said earlier that, and you said too, that they live fulfilling lives, which is true, it's not the original direction that they were meant to go. So the
Mhm.
situation took them in a different direction, and they had the strength and fortitude to press through. And it's messy, going through the healing process gets really messy and it's painful, but the freedom on the other side of that is worth it.
And it is worth it. It's always worth it. It's worth it to stay alive and continue to be here and to know that whatever it is that afflicts you, whatever it is that has happened to you, that nothing that has happened to anyone is unspeakable, and that as long as you're alive, there's always that chance to be able to get through it. And healing really comes in different forms. It comes at
Right.
different times. It really People are different, and we all have similarities, but we have differences, and there are different things that are deeply impactful in the healing process for people. And I think it's important for us to understand that, respect that, and try our best to help cultivate that if we can.
Right.
And it's ultimately for themselves. And it's interesting, one of the guys in my book named Jim said in the book that he wouldn't change anything that happened to him. And here's a man that was, raped by a priest as a kid. And so it's just like, for him to say I wouldn't change anything is quite powerful to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I find that to be quite powerful for the world. And there are many people that feel that way as well. There are some who are so upset and so angry and justifiably so. They're like, why did this happen to me? How could this happen to me? It's completely destroyed their lives. And yet there's other people who are saying, I wouldn't change a thing that's happened to me, and look where they've come. And I think that's part of the power of the book, and that's part of the power of healing, and that hopefully people can read these stories and see what is possible for them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I agree. I agree. It is really powerful. And I ponder, and maybe someday this question will, I don't know if it'll ever be fully answered, but it's like, I and I remember when back in the day when I was in my victim mindset and I couldn't get out of it. I saw that I was there, but I couldn't get out of it. But I kept searching for a way out. And that's something I don't understand why some victims do, is they get stuck in that place of anger, hurt, or
Mm.
whatever those emotions are. They're stuck. And I don't know if they just don't see that there's another side to it. I don't know if what their pain and their anger is so uh, I don't know what the word is, but like that's all they can see, that
Mm.
they can't see the possibility of having a fulfilling life. What do you think?
It's true. I was going to actually ask you, how did you come out of it? Because people ask me, how do you do this? How do you counsel people? And I talk about listening more than speaking. And sometimes you sitting with someone in silence. But
Mm,
there are times that I've had to, like, just screamed. Like, I've lost like my mind screaming at someone because of what you're saying right now. Because some people in certain moments in time are they're like possessed. They're literally like this thing over them, and it's hard to explain, but it's sometimes I've literally like just screamed as loud as I can to try to get them out of like
snap.
this snap out of this thing that's not
Hmm.
real. And like, this is reality. Like, this is what is actually happening and what can happen. And I've seen people in those states, and then I've seen them come out of it. And it's like, they might not even remember what they were like at that time,
Hmm.
which is fine. And I get why people get there, right? I get why people are there, because that is what hopelessness is. That is what
Oh,
despair is. That is when you're just shrouded with shame, and you're just like, I am truly worthless. I'd rather die. But it's just not true. And
right.
so being able to witness people come out of that
Yeah.
is very special. But you actually hit on something quite powerful to me, because that is real for plenty of people. So
Hmm.
that people are, you know they can be stuck in anger, shame, but it's so crippling. The crime can be so damaging and so deep that it can affect people so much that they actually don't see what's possible. They don't
Hmm.
believe what is possible. They don't understand. Um, and that's part of the challenge of the counseling work. And sometimes it takes years to get
Hmm.
someone to just change it, even just a little bit. But when it happens, it can be it's life changing.
It's powerful. I would, yeah, I love that. And for me, I had, I had the inkling in me that I needed healing way back, like since I was 19. So I always had that in me. And what fueled it is I didn't like the way I felt. And I knew there was something that wasn't right in me. Fortunately, I never considered myself broken. I think if we get to that place where we feel like we're broken, like we can't fix it. But I just knew that I didn't like how I felt. I didn't like the pain and I wanted to get away from it. And I was searching for a way.
Mm,
And that's what motivated me. But when I think back, there's definitely times, especially when I was full on in my victim mindset, survival mode, that when there's a wrong done to me, I would get stuck on it for sure.
mm,
And unless it got resolved. And of course, most of them didn't get resolved, right? I
mhm,
mean, there's just things that just aren't going to get resolved. And so, but I would stay in that angry mindset.
mhm,
And what got me completely out of it is watching myself and being aware of the cycle that I was going in because I could see the cycle and I would literally stand back and watch this thing going on and realizing, okay, do you see yourself repeating this again? So you're the common denominator. What can you do different?
mm,
And that's kind of where it went. But my
mhm,
fuel was I wanted this pain out of me. I wanted to feel different. I just knew I wanted to feel different. I didn't want to keep feeling the way I was feeling.
mm,
So that's why when I see someone stuck in that place, and I've seen it myself, and I know that when they are absolutely stuck there, in your case, it's a little different than when I was coaching, is that you they need to go into deeper therapy. That
mm,
like that's above my pay grade kind of, that they need to
mhm,
go. There's some really deep stuff possibly there that needs
mhm,
to be worked out in therapy but I can certainly give my view of how I worked through it. And it worked for me. And
mhm.
it definitely can work for others, but some of this stuff goes so deep like this. I mean, this is, huge.
And you and I were speaking a couple months ago, and we were talking, and it's not yes, I work with sexual trauma, but there are other traumas, and sometimes there are multiple forms and different forms of trauma within an individual. So when
Right.
we talked about how, if someone is abused, often as children, how it can affect their self-esteem, their confidence, their self-worth, and how that plays out in the choices they make into adulthood, and how they can end up in really, really damaging relationships and even marriages.
Mm-hmm.
And so to see the connections of that, and how, so if someone is already traumatized and they have literally no confidence or any sense of self-worth at all, and they end up in a abusive marriage, you can just imagine, right, how someone can again want to die and just, as you say in a victim mentality, but to be so down and to just not see and not accept or just not have any hope at all that anything will get better. Um, I can see how people can get there, and how
Mm-hmm.
it's just so sad. And so hopefully the more that we can do the best to impact people in positive ways, the more we can help people if we can, just by our conversation now. Hopefully, even one person might not end up in that relationship, might not end up in that addiction, might not end up in that marriage, because it's
Mm-hmm.
not what it's so destructive on top of deep, serious pain.
It's layered trauma. It's layered trauma. And
Hmm.
I've said this in my podcast before, and I'm sure this is what caused this conversation, is that I was asked one time on a podcast if a person's childhood abuse is left unhealed, will they end up in domestic violence relationships? And the answer is, yeah, it just looks different. And it was true with me. I wasn't, fortunately, when I went into my first two marriages, they weren't physical. And in my first marriage, both my husband and I came together and we were both messes. So it was both of us kind of going on and fueling that very unhealthy relationship. But my next marriage was a full-on narcissist, full on, full on. And so when I was out of that one, I had to sit back and look and go, I'm the common denominator here. What am I doing that is causing me to choose these men? And there were commonalities about these two men with my father.
Mm.
So it makes sense. It totally makes sense. And it's not like these two guys were bad guys, because I'm not going to diss on them at all. It's just the way we come together. We were both unhealthy and we came together. And it was after my second marriage that I really dived deep into myself and looked at what was going on and built a relationship with myself and did a lot of healing that way. And I'm now in a really healthy marriage that is very different than any marriage I had before. So there is definitely hope.
I think it's very important to share that, and the people, people even in their 40s or
Hmm.
even in their 50s don't think that they'll find someone that will treat them
Right.
well. They don't believe that they can find someone that will treat them well, that they actually can have a lifelong loving committed relationship, or again marriage. But they can, and even if they don't, it'd be better to be alone than to end
Correct.
up in this. I mean, I'm thinking I have a woman who her boyfriend raped her multiple times, and
Mhm.
she is just consistently struggling with this and talks about him. And I finally just once said to her, you should be thankful you broke up, because if you didn't, and if you ended up getting married, you actually have no idea how much worse it would have been for you. And I think that is actually clicking with her, and I think it's helping her in her own healing process. So there are just
Yeah.
countless people that are going through similar things like this.
We get kind of stuck in our thoughts, and I'll speak on my own behalf because I can kind of relate to her, where you kind of get stuck in
Mhm,
that thought and you don't know how to snap out of it. And it takes someone saying something like that to you that kind of goes, oh, wait a minute. Oh, you're right. You're
mhm,
right.
mhm.
Um, that's yeah. I Wow. So, is there a top story that you can share with us, maybe from your book or something, that of somebody who went through some horrific stuff who is now doing so well?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned I could talk about many different people, but
Mhm.
I did mention this guy Jim. He's a friend of mine. He is again raped by a priest, and it was very important for him to talk about the grooming process and how
Mhm.
this priest sought him out. And when you talked earlier about you, as you were the common denominator, how what was it about you that made these choices? But there's another side to that too, Lisa, where there are people who are choosing their victims.
Oh, yes.
There are people who are choosing their traumatized, uh, unhealthy people to take them, to abuse them, to marry them, and to take, not just sexually, emotionally, financially, many different things. So here's a guy who was very, very important to him, for him to talk about the grooming process, how he was picked, how he was raped, and how it just affected his life. But he is an advocate. I mean, he goes out, he's called a survivor speaker, where they go out and share their stories. And he has gone, I've seen him, I've been with him. He's gone into schools and different events, and he just is honest, and he gives everyone the opportunity to ask him anything they want. He's so genuine, so passionate. He has a deep love of this to help people, and again, because of his abuse. And here's a guy again who has two kids, a husband. He's loving, very successful in his life, and he's just a testament to what is possible through, again, the horrors of childhood sexual abuse. So I love him, and I'm just so thankful for him. And there's just so many stories in the book, as depressing as this topic is and as heavy as this is, and it is, and I didn't
Hmm.
shy away from the realities of it in the book, and I don't in my interviews or anything. But I never leave you down. It's not leaving people down. It's always
Hmm.
trying to bring them up and really showing uh, what can happen, and what else could happen for other people. So it's awesome to do it. It's awesome to meet people like him, and they give me strength. I mean, I learned so much from listening to people, and I'm honored when people open up to me and to share their oftentimes deepest and darkest pain, and it changes me as well. So we're all kind of in this crazy thing of life together, and hopefully we can actually help each other to get through it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what this podcast is about, is really educating, getting the word out. And, and at the end, at the end of every podcast, there's hope. I have people come on and share their stories, but they
Mhm.
have to have gone through, a pretty significant healing process and be able to share that, so that that gives other people hope. It is a heavy subject. It's not always easy.
Mhm. And then just to know that there really are resources out there. There are people 24 hours a day somewhere in the world that will listen to you, that will talk with you. So it's part of my advice is there's so many people that suffer in silence and they suffer in isolation. They're alone. And I understand that. But ultimately, to try to contact someone that can really help you, whether it's a therapist or a crisis counselor or a
Hmm.
hotline, or a friend, it's just someone that loves you, that will treat you well, and they treat you the way you deserve to be treated.
So
If you
let's
find
get,
that, it'll be helpful.
yeah, I mean, let's go down that road a little bit, it can be a man or a woman that is sexually abused.
Hmm.
Um, And so what should somebody do? Like you said, they should reach out, but really kind of take us through the steps,
Mm.
because honestly, I mean, I haven't been in that situation. I think I know what I would do, but maybe there's more things I should be doing that I'm not aware of.
Well, I never tell people what to do, and unless they ask my advice on a specific thing. And it's really different for everyone, and even in time. So, if you meet someone immediately after an assault, it doesn't mean they want to go to the police. It doesn't mean they want to go to a hospital to get a rape kit done.
Yeah.
And we don't force anyone to do that, and I don't think we should as in life.
Yeah.
But in 2 months or in 20 years, someone might say, "I would actually love to file a report with the police." That's different, right? So it's trying to understand, again, listening to them, being present with them, and trying to meet them where they're at, wherever that is. So that could be just hanging out and watching TV with them. That could be, wait, what if we did contact the police? What would that look like? Other people like, I don't want to deal with the police. I just want to not think about this person. I want my nightmares to stop. Right? There's just a whole range of stuff that can go on. So it's not about telling them what to do, but it's understanding what do they need in that moment in time, and trying to be with them and to hopefully be a bridge for them. Again, you mentioned therapy. I would never not recommend therapy to someone who needs it, right? So, and there are plenty of people that say, "Nope, I'm not going to a therapist." And even 3 years later, you can say, "Have you considered a therapist again?" And maybe they are open to it, and then you can try to help them try to find a therapist. So, depending on what the need is, and trying to be a bridge to help them get there.
Right, right. So I'm sure you have recommendations of, and I know this is a huge subject, but can you give us some recommendations on how we could protect ourselves so that we don't get in those situations? I mean, there's some obvious ones, but what are some ones that we maybe wouldn't think of?
Well, it's interesting you say that because it's almost like it's our fault if we get abused, versus why to me a better question is, what is it about a human being that chooses to assault another human being?
Right. And I didn't mean it to sound like that. What I really meant, what can we do to protect ourselves is the better question. Like, what
What
can we
what
do to better protect ourselves? If I know there are some things that we can do, but I know that it's not our fault. And I'm not trying to say that at all. I'm not trying to say that it's our fault or that we caused it, because nothing that we've done could ever cause us to be sexually abused.
No, of course, but it's an interesting question because I once heard of a man who teaches self-defense, and a woman came up to him and said, "I did everything you taught me and I was still raped." And so it's like,
Mm,
it's how does one protect themselves when their own family member abuses them in their own home? It's a challenging question because I could say, anyone could say, well, don't go out at night and don't be with that person and don't go
Right.
to school, but it's just not realistic because that's a child has to be with their family if and the child has to go to school, or even people that go out or people that put themselves in unsafe situations still don't get hurt or assaulted, and
Yeah,
they
I
could
was
be
one
in
of
a
them. Yeah, and as far as children go, yeah, I mean, there's no responsibility whatsoever on a child to try to protect themselves. That's our job as adults to
Mhm,
protect the child. I would
mhm,
never put that on a child. I actually had a counselor ask me one time, and not a counselor, it was actually a coach, and I fired him after that. But he asked me, "So what do you think that you did to cause this abuse when you were a
mhm,
child?"
mhm,
And I instantly was angry because I just thought there is nothing I did that could have prevented it or caused it. It was
mhm,
somebody else's decision.
mhm,
And I said to him, I said, if I were to ask my ladies in my workshop, the childhood abuse healing workshop, if I were to ask them this question, do you know how bad that would derail them? Because all of a sudden the thought that they've been carrying all these years that it was my fault, I did something, I did something, it would just reaffirm that and re-traumatize them.
mhm.
No, children, it is never their fault when they're abused, ever.
And I would argue even with adults. Right. So
Right.
even if like I could say to someone, oh, stay with your friends and don't if you go drinking and stay with your friends and stay with your girls and you all take an Uber together and you can do that and you can say all that and do that
Yeah,
and one of them can still get assaulted. Like
right.
it can just happen. One thing that's helpful, do I recommend self-defense and learning how to defend yourself?
That's the
Yes,
area
of
I was
course.
going to. That's the
Oh,
mindset
yeah.
I had. Yeah, that's why I asked that question, because that's the mindset, is that I've gone through self-defense courses and they talk about the things to look for, that just being proactive as much as you can. And I understand that if somebody's going to rape me, there's nothing I can do to really prevent that if they're really set on doing that. But there are measures that we can take to at least feel like we're somewhat empowered, that we're not just walking
Hmm.
around being victims, and if
Hmm.
it's going to happen, it's going to happen, and there's nothing we can do.
No, you definitely. I mean, yes, we can learn how to defend ourselves, and that can absolutely help in an attack. The trauma is still there of someone
Oh
attacking them.
yeah.
I remember being in college and a criminal justice professor mentioned he said, "Who thinks mace is helpful?" And many of us, I believe I was one of them, was like, "Oh yeah, of course it is." And he was like, "It isn't unless you have it in your hand."
Right, at the
Because
time.
yeah, right. Because if you keep it in your bag, you actually can't even grab it. So
Mm-mm.
it's like a false sense of safety in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what is it? What I think is important in terms of protecting oneself is building on oneself to be able to be confident to not so much put themselves in bad situations in the world, but to almost really look at who are you getting involved with,
Mm-hmm.
who are the relationships, who are you spending time with, who are you again dating, or how can we see things that look weird with maybe a teacher or a coach or again a family member. So are there things we can do to prevent this? Absolutely. And part of it, I think, is being aware of certain signs. If why is someone taking a kid and isolating them? What is happening? So I do believe the more we can be aware and acting on things. If we you can't prevent it all and you can't stop something you don't know is happening.
Right.
I can literally do nothing about something that is happening in my neighbor's house right now. I have no idea what they're doing, right? But if we are aware of something or become aware of anything, to do our best in our own flaws and our own weaknesses, but to do our best to investigate it, contact other adults, try to see is someone being hurt or not, and then going from there, I think is important in terms of prevention. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And one thing I want to add to that, and I know it was helpful for me, is listen to your gut. Listen to your
Mhm,
intuition.
mhm,
If there's even a yellow flag going off in you,
mhm,
you need
mhm,
to take a step back and look at the whole thing.
mhm,
Because and I will say, in my second marriage, had I listened to my gut from the beginning,
mhm,
I would have never married him.
mhm,
I went against my gut and I paid the price for it.
mhm,
My choice,
mhm.
in that case. But listen to your gut. It's always right.
I agree. I do recommend people listen to their gut. There's something I've talked to people and I've heard people say things like there was just something off about
Mm-hmm.
him, or she gave off this really like just this vibe. It just made me feel a certain way. And so that's their language to attempt to understand and to describe what they're feeling. I know of a man who and men and women, any gender can be abused, but any gender can abuse. And,
Mm-hmm.
and there, I know of women who are sexually abusing their own children.
Yeah.
And so there's a guy who he was teaching in schools. He ended up getting pushed out. He ended up being arrested. And years later, I'm having a beer with a friend, and he was talking to me. He's like, dude, I just remember him. And he was just like describing, like he didn't know at the time that he was abusing anyone, but he just had this feeling. So to your point of going with your gut, if that's something you feel, it's really worth listening to.
Mm-hmm. It's certainly worth taking a step back and investigating it more. And the one thing that I learned is, and this was definitely in my survival mode, that I just automatically trusted people, just automatically. I gave them the
Mm,
benefit of the doubt, trusted them, and that cost me dearly. And you don't, I don't just automatically trust people. I give them a certain amount of trust, but they have to earn my trust. They have to earn their way in and make sure that they're a safe person.
you bring up an interesting concept of trust, and it's interesting as you've experienced how unhealthy it is to trust everyone, but it's also unhealthy to not trust anyone.
Correct. Because I went
And
that way too, right?
right,
I went to that extreme as well.
and I can't. I mean, I understand it. I can
Hmm.
understand why people don't trust anyone, and that's part of my work. That's part of my counseling work, is to try to get people to trust something, right? A person, anything really, to
Hmm.
to build that trust. And if I and other counselors and other people and advocates and just friends and just people who care, if they're able to help someone trust again, that is vitally important in the healing process.
Trusting themselves too, right?
That is again one of the biggest challenges
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
because they, well, I mean, right? Because it's like they can't trust anyone, they can't trust themselves. It's just this awful, like
S-
never ending
Circle.
cycle, downward
Hmm.
spiral of just shame and negativity and pain and guilt. And you're nailing on it. Like you're hitting on some of the things that are so important in the healing process of sexual abuse survivors. So, um, but it's so sad, but it's possible. People get there. You're talking about it now. So, um, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the goals of this podcast is to get out information that you wouldn't normally even talk about, or where there's abuse that you wouldn't even think of. Like I
Mm,
have a guest that it'll be coming out in a few weeks, and he specializes in abuse in sports, children's sports.
mm-hmm,
It's huge. I mean,
mm,
there's like 20 million children a year in the United States that play sports, and I forget what the exact percentage is, but I believe it's over 30% are abused. And so much of that, I feel, is lack of knowledge.
mm,
It's lack of awareness of even knowing. And so that's his mission, is one, to get the awareness and education out there, and two, he also investigates some of these. So he's got some really
mm,
deep knowledge about this. And
mm,
I mean, after talking to him on the pre-interview and then talking to him on the podcast, I mean, my heart is there. Like I want to help with this,
mm,
because think about, as we get this awareness out there and get this education out there, how powerful it is. And even if you just did it in the children's sports section, that's huge. I mean, we all know kids that are in sports. So if we could educate the kids and the parents, imagine the impact on that.
who's doing the abusing? Like, if what was,
Coaches,
yeah, okay.
yeah, the
Is it,
coaches mostly. Yeah. And and there's no set guidelines across the board. And that's
mhm,
kind of what he's trying to do also, is set guidelines, just like there's not a one particular format of exactly what trauma and abuse is. We're
mhm,
just now over the last, what, 20 years, 10 years, really understanding about the depths of trauma. We're starting to get a better understanding of it and what it is and what childhood abuse is. I mean, when I was a kid, the stuff, most of the stuff that happened to me, there was no protection for me. There was no laws, nobody called, nobody
Hmm.
stepped in.
Hmm.
And so we're, excuse me, not only are we aware now of the abuse, but what is abuse and how it affects us and how deep it goes.
It's interesting that, we have so many debates and disagreements on politics and religion
Yeah.
and just issues in the world, right? But it blows my mind that all human beings don't seem to agree on protecting children. W-
Amen.
So and yes, I have a huge focus on sexual abuse, but you have kids who are being abused, and you asked earlier about how do we protect ourselves. Part of the ways we do that is what this guy's talking about and what you two are talking about of preventing coaches who are abusing kids in sports and athletics. It's awful. How can you do that to a child for what? And so when we're able to become aware of it and act upon it, you're helping kid. And also part of what I do is, and it's even in my educational trainings, is trying to create a safe space.
Yeah.
And I know that that phrase gets probably overused plenty of times, and oh, we're gonna have a safe space. No, but I mean like truly, like
Mm-hmm.
I won't even engage in the conversation with people unless we're all ready to go together, right? And it's very difficult for people to talk. It's very difficult for adults. I know adults, people in their 50s, that still just can't say the word rape, let alone say I was raped, let alone
Yeah.
said I was raped by so and so. And it's arguably even harder for children. It's very difficult for children to speak about whatever is happening to them. So the
They don't
more we
understand what's happening. They don't have a way to articulate it because they don't understand what's going on.
Right. So the more we as adults can cultivate a safe environment, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's sexual abuse or from a coach or anything, to allow them to feel comfortable and safe with us to open up even in the slightest ways. And it might not be to your point, right? They're not must say my coach is abusing me in those words, although they maybe could, but it could be something like I don't feel good today. And what do you need?
Yes.
It's something. It's listening
Mm-hmm.
to our kids and exploring whatever it is and trying to get them to that is part of the way we can prevent and help is by simply having a safe and comfortable and loving environment for our children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's where I want to start is protecting the children and educating the adults is what is so critical.
It is, and it's challenging when the adults uh, want nothing to do with it. When
That I don't understand either.
Well, take any issue, not just sexual abuse. Say,
Right.
there are adults who refuse to even will not speak to their own school about their own child, and so it's very difficult to teach a child to work with a kid when their own parent won't support you, be with you, engage in the conversation. So there are neglect is real. It's not
Yeah.
just sexual abuse. Neglect is real, and there are so many parents who are just so loving, so caring, do anything for their kids, and others that abuse them, and others that neglect them, and others that just, it's not that big a deal, or they'll just say, they're fine, they'll get over it. It's not that. So we try the
Mm.
best we can with understanding that there are limitations in this world.
And that's the thing. Give your kids a voice. Let them have a voice. I
Mhm.
was raised with yours to be seen and not heard. So
Mhm.
you don't have a voice. If you have a voice, it doesn't matter. And kids need to have a voice. And I've bragged about her on my podcast before, but my one daughter-in-law is so good with her kids. They're at an age where they can be vocal, and she's very good about sitting down with them and letting them have a full voice and talking stuff out. That's our jobs as parents, is
Mhm.
we're to teach them. And if we're not showing them how to do it or we're not giving them the space, they're not going to learn how. And that's what I recognize with myself. I wasn't taught a lot of this stuff. I had to figure it out on my own. And I made a lot of mistakes, trust me.
Mhm.
So let your children have a voice. give them time, sit down with them and let them talk. And sometimes it takes them a while to say this stuff. They don't know how to articulate this. Here's a great example. My daughter-in-law was telling me that my grandson is 5 years old, and he was trying to describe to her this pain he was having. And what she finally realized is he was having a headache, but he didn't know how to say, because he's too young,
Mm,
I have a headache. He
mhm,
just was describing it as best he could. And
mhm,
then she came to the point where she's like, oh, you have a headache. Okay.
mhm, mhm.
And address it. So kids need time and like you said, a comfortable, safe place where they can have a voice.
You keep hitting on s- some of these things that I believe are necessary in the healing process of part of what I try to do is what you're saying is try to help someone find their voice. And that comes in different ways.
Hmm.
And that can be, it's not just even verbally, it's having their voice, it can be in writing, can be in dance, to be able to
Yeah.
express something to find that's when I got trained by just amazing counselors, 15 years ago. They taught us when someone's raped, you have the power and control taken from you. Okay, this
Yeah.
isn't even about sex. It's about power and control. And I was like, what? So it's power and control. We try to help people gain their power and control back for
Mm.
themselves. And part of what that is helping them find their voice. And it's possible. It can happen. You have a voice. We all have a voice, and it can come out in different ways. And it's just a gift to be able to do that. And I'm deeply thankful that we could do this together today.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the voicing is really big for me too, because I didn't have a voice until about 7 years ago. And it literally physically got stuck in my throat. It was,
Mhm,
when I think back on it, it was so bizarre. And I remember when I realized, oh, these words are stuck in my throat. And it was my now husband. We weren't even having a bad discussion at all. We were
mhm,
just having a conversation. What I was going to share with him or what I was going to say, I remember was vulnerable for me. And I just looked over at him and I just stared at him and he said, are you going to say it? And I'm like, well, I want to, but it won't come out. He's like, just say it. I'm like, it literally, it was the best way I can describe it is it got stuck right here
mhm,
and it would not come up.
mhm,
And I'm married to a very patient man who is definitely one of my safe spaces. And he said, well, let's just let it, let's just give it time.
mhm,
And that right there enabled me, I didn't say it right then,
mhm.
but that interaction with him opened the door for me to go, okay, I am in a safe place. And with time, I was able to, I can say anything to him now.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wonderful. It's a great place to be. But it's been a long, long journey. And like you were saying earlier, healing doesn't come overnight. It's a journey.
Mhm,
It's a journey. But it's one worth staying on. And I've said it before, it's kind of like spring cleaning. It gets really messy before it gets
mhm,
better.
mhm. And you said two things just now of patience and time.
Hmm.
Be patient with yourself, which is
Hmm.
really challenging for a lot of people
It
to do.
is.
Be patient with yourself and give yourself time and know that there is no timetable on this.
No.
There's too many people that say, I should be here by now. Why am I still doing this now? And that is part of the war that goes on within a human being with severe trauma. And it's like, no, 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 no. It's okay. It's okay. You're you don't have there's no timetable on this. So be patient with yourself, give yourself time, and believe in the possibility of time and what can happen in
Hmm.
time.
It is a journey. It really is. And I get that because there's times that I've gotten really frustrated. And it's at that point that I realize, okay, I need to stop and take a breath. And I'm able to move on.
Mhm.
This has been great. Thank you so much. What would you like to leave with our listeners? What one thing or two things you'd like to leave with them?
I really like how we just ended at that with that. I really actually love what you said, and I really, really want to try to get through to people to be patient with themselves, to give themselves time, to know there's no timetable on this, and that anything that happened to you is not unspeakable, and that you really can get through it. You really can change, you really can follow your heart, and you really can live a fulfilling, meaningful life, a meaningful existence. And I recommend that people let love guide them.
Mm,
It is possible, and I wouldn't continue doing it if there was never anything good that came out of it. I mean, that people really don't get better.
yeah,
It wouldn't make any sense.
good
So
point.
they really do, and um, I really thank you for this, and unfortunately, there's just too many people hurting. And if you do,
Yeah.
you have gifts, and especially when you heal, whatever that means to you and how you grow in your life, that you can also do things for others. It's not just for myself. It's not just for you, Lisa. It's us, and people can to grow and get stronger and
Hmm.
make an impact with other people, one person at a time. You do it one person at a time, you can change the world.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. Yeah, that's why I do this podcast is I want to shorten people's suffering. Well, thank you so much. This has been great.
Thank you very much.